So later on today, I'm probably going to do a live stream that focuses specifically on Anthony Joshua's demeanor. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you had noticed in the recent times, especially with the Jermaine Franklin fight, even with the Otto Wallin fight, and everything after the Usyk fight, Anthony Joshua sort of changed his demeanor a little bit, and we're going to explore that from a psychological point of view, a sociological point of view, but also try to understand it from a combat sports point of view. In other words, how will it affect the sweet science and how he's going to implement it all throughout his entire career from here on. Now that he is free, away from the shackles of trying to play this role of a mainstream guy of some sort, now sort of going back to his roots of, let's say, the gangster guy that he knows himself that he can be, especially growing up in Watford, out of all places where there's heavy rampant knife crimes and all types of violence that goes on in that community, right? So it is no wonder that he decided to fall back into that, or he's always been that guy, and now he's sort of really easing into coming out of that particular closet, or what have you, for lack of a better choice of words. Now, let's focus into the entire heavyweight division of not just MMA, but of boxing as well. Now, what I had noticed with the heavyweight division in the current moment of time with Tom Aspinall, Francis Ngannou, you could add into that mix, even though he's no longer in the UFC, and also John Jones. We sort of have a three kings scenario going on, very similar to what had happened in boxing a few years ago with the likes of, let's say, Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, and Tyson Fury. Now, the landscape has changed a whole lot into somewhat of just Usyk and Tyson Fury. And now, Francis Ngannou, guess what? He sort of slides right into that mix, and it's really insane to think that, yes, Francis Ngannou is not only sliding into one particular world, but he's also sliding into another world where he is now officially ranked in the WBC's top 10. So make of that as you will. That's not something that's going to be popular to, let's say, a lot of boxing pugilists. Although I do notice there's a lot of people that seem to be coming around to the idea that, you know what, this guy deserves to be in the rankings. He fought our best guy in the heavyweight division, looked great. Some can even argue that he won. He deserves his rank. So now you have Francis Ngannou in somewhat of a higher option setting. He's got boxing, meaning that he can go fight Dylan White. He can go fight Joseph Parker. He can go fight Deontay Wilder. He can go fight Anthony Joshua. And he can always go back and fight Tyson Fury sometime down the road. Either way, all these fights are all big money for him. What's crazy enough is that he has this same thing going on in the UFC, but he's not in the UFC because he can't fight John Jones. He can't fight Tom Aspinall, who, by the way, right now, in this current moment of time, is red hot. And that in and of itself is a different category of content to make why the top heavyweights in the world in MMA and boxing are in the UK, right? You got Tom Aspinall, then you have his training partner that he boxes and spars with, Tyson Fury. And then you have all these other heavyweights that are fighting in the regional scene, such as Phil DeFries, who's the KSW champion out in Poland. The list goes on. And then you have new heavyweights that are coming up in the ranks of the UFC. You got that Mick Conlon guy, I believe, who trains with Tom Aspinall himself. So one of the heavyweights that he trains with. There's a lot of guys in the UK, but more importantly, the heavyweight division right now could not be even more stacked around the world, and there is one pinpoint guy that you can really tie into that whole mix, and that is none other than Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou, again, like I said, he has these options in both sides, but what will he do? More than likely, what he's going to do is stay in boxing, and then you have Dana White coming out absolutely refusing the idea of him possibly fighting John Jones. He said that they tried to make the fight in the UFC. They weren't able to do it for a couple of reasons, and now that he's not in the UFC, they're going to try to make the fight. This is Dana White's argument when that particular journalist asked him this question about, let's say, doing a cross promotional, which seemed such a sacrilegious idea to Dana White. And you can't blame him, because you got to understand that the UFC does not want to share their clout with a company like the PFL, who never put their shares and their times in, let's say, during the pandemic. They weren't there during that time when the UFC took the risk of taking on different world governments and sanctioning bodies on top of different health organizations that were completely against the idea of having fights in the pandemic. And then on top of that, the other investments that they've made in the past, and they're just not going to share that with anybody. So you can kind of understand where they're coming in that particular aspect, where they are coming from, especially in Dana White's abrasive response to the reporter that seemingly just asked really an innocent question, a normal combat sports question. It really isn't that groundbreaking or controversial in and of itself, but in the eyes of the UFC and how they want to save face to the world and how they want to market their brand and supremacy, and not only that, their monopoly, this is the way that it has to be. But nonetheless, on the boxing side, for sure, Francis Ngannou has all these options. Now, on the MMA side, we literally have a three kings situation. Why? Because number one, you have Tom Aspinall, who has the stake of claim to the heavyweight division, right? Because he's the interim champion. John Jones and Stipe seem to be on their way out, and whenever they were going to finish this fight, it seemed that this particular November that just passed on the 11th would have been the retirement fight of John Jones and Stipe, which, by the way, is a reason why the tickets were outrageously expensive and remain so even with the replacement of Tom Aspinall. So now you are muttering the waters of the UFC's heavyweight division, because he is the interim champion. John is not really the lineal champion. He won it against Cyril Gane. And how did Cyril Gane get there? Well, he went to a 5-round decision against the guy who is unarguably considered the lineal heavyweight mixed martial arts champion in the UFC in particular, which is Francis Ngannou, in the way that they marketed him going into that Tyson Fury fight. So now it's really confusing. And this is what I mean when I said it's muttering up the waters of this particular division. There's no clear sign of any clean water in sight, right? Whether it's at the river or the sea when it comes to the heavyweight division. Any of these guys can have the claim of being the undisputed guy. You can even say this about Tom Aspinall right now with the exact reasons that I just mentioned of John Jones and Stipe being their potential last fight. Now, John Jones still has an option to come back. Suppose Stipe never comes back and he just says, well, I'm just not going to fight anybody. Maybe John doesn't want to fight anybody other than Stipe. Yes, Tom Aspinall is a tougher matchup. We would probably give him more props for it. And by the day, the popularity of Tom Aspinall is growing. So maybe he can surpass Stipe in the notoriety and just push him out and then fight John in an even bigger fight. Which, by the way, I got to tell you, John needs an opponent like Tom Aspinall, because you're dealing with a guy who is English, right? Similar to Ricky Hatton. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that John Jones, if he's the Mayweather of this particular sport and in the heavyweight division, he needs a Ricky Hatton-like character, and Tom Aspinall can play that role. The only difference is that Tom Aspinall is not exactly the quintessential bad boy heavyweight that we want to see. For example, you look at the WWE, who was the scariest guy that you could imagine in the entire league and an entire profession of that particular sports realm? Well, it's none other than The Undertaker. Now, why is that? The Undertaker has a certain demeanor about him that is not only scary, right? He has this demeanor where he plays up to being the big guy. So if you are the big guy, you can easily intimidate anybody. You can easily be the guy that looks scary, doesn't really talk much, similar to Pereira. By the way, even Dana White had mentioned this, something to the effect where, you know what, Alex Pereira does have charisma. You just don't understand it because his charisma is being a scary, badass dude. And lo and behold, that is a charisma in and of itself because he is a big man. He's a knockout artist and he knows how to play up that role. Tom Aspinall is a little bit more humble in that, and he's more of a traditional martial artist, typical jiu-jitsu guy, doesn't really want to over dominate the room, doesn't feel like he is the quintessential macho man or have anything to prove. Now, this is great. This is noble. This is awesome. Anybody that, let's say, trains with Khabib or lives in that particular ethos and that particular life trajectory, you can absolutely agree to that. The problem is, like I said before, and like I've said over and over again in this particular channel, the combat sports world is dominated by the casual fan base because they are the ones that are bringing in the millions, whereas the hardcore guys, they are the ones that are just bringing in people of the thousands, people of, let's say, not even 100,000, right? In other words, you're the main base of followers for mixed martial arts. So in a bad night, they can guarantee that 100,000 of you are going to show up and watch an ESPN card or maybe buy a pay-per-view that is not pay-per-view worthy, but you will buy it because of the level of stiff competition that is involved in the storylines and in the card as opposed to, let's say, the competitive architecture that is being presented to you. So they can rely to you on that. But when it comes to drama, when it comes to trash talking, when it comes to firing up that dopamine in your brain that gets you excited for what a fight is, because let's be honest, right? All of this, the entire fight world, it is nothing more than just a business. It is nothing more than just a sport. Take the violence away from it. It is really no different than you going into a random basketball court or a random field where people are playing soccer and saying, hey, I got next. This is no different than that. The only difference is that obviously there's a business involved, there is a promotion involved, there's an entertainment factor involved that comes with production, lights, and camera action and everything in between that deals with Hollywood and primetime television. So that's what you have going on with the world of mixed martial arts and combat sports. Now, because of that, you need to turn it up. You need to fire up that certain part of a person's brain that wants to get them out of the attention of, let's say, a wedding that they have to go to on a Saturday, somebody's birthday, or somebody's outing in, let's say, a theme park of some sort, right? You have to attract people to waste their Saturday in order for them to watch you fight. And can Tom Aspinall do that? I gotta tell you, yes and no. The reason why I say yes is because Tom Aspinall is British. Let's take a look at the TNT Sports, or what was known as BT Sport, before they changed the name or at least bought the company from Ted Turner of some sort, or whatever type of agreements or negotiations they had going on with that. BT Sport, as we know it to be TNT Sport, highlights and shamelessly tells you they are for the British fighters. They cover all the British fighters. So if there's a London card, if there's a Vegas card, like with Leon Edwards, they're going to highlight and cover the British fighters that are involved and not necessarily everybody else. And that is with good reason because, well, British people, I mean, let's just be honest, right? They are some of the most patriotic fight fan base, if not the most patriotic sports fan base in the entire world, right? Probably more than America, because in America, you could watch a World Cup soccer league game, and then out of nowhere, you have American supporters that are supporting Argentina, Brazil, and other countries that maybe they have ancestry towards in some kind of way. Either way, that is the British in comparison to anybody else that are sports fans around the world. So they're going to cater to that particular audience. They're going to highlight you, the British guys. They're going to go and do these productions where, let's say, they are doing a bus tour, like what John Fury did with Tom Aspinall and Molly and Patty. They were sitting in that London-style bus, but it was in Manchester, and it was great. They were just sitting there talking about fighting. The camera crew was with them. it was wonderfully done, right? This literally highlights, like, look, this is who represents us in the world stage in the UFC or in the world of boxing. And we want to highlight this to our fellow Brits, and they do a marvelous job at doing that. So, in turn, yes, it does help if Tom Aspinall does open his mouth up a little bit, create some sort of controversy, and try to stir up some beef of some sort. But in a way, he almost doesn't need to do that. Yes, it helps, it creates more, but at the same time, BT Sport does such a great job in their production and in their promotion that he doesn't need to do that. Even that little cartoon they did with Khabib, where he retired and he finished his career only to, let's say, have this cartoon where it featured like some sort of stick figures with him and his dad living in the mountains, and then his dad passed away, and then he came back. They had like an emotional music behind it. It was brilliantly done. Same thing with Leon Edwards. The way that they highlighted the fact that he came from a violent culture in Jamaica, only for him to move to the UK to move into an even more violent gang culture, and then highlighting the situation that he had going on with his dad being a top boy and whatnot, right? It's all brilliant, right? And then Leon Edwards, guess what? He's not a Conor McGregor. He's not an Ian Gary type of guy. He doesn't talk a lot of trash. But, I mean, look, I think his pay-per-view sales could do better. But obviously, that's all predicated on the fact that you got to talk and use your mouthpiece a little bit. And by the way, speaking of Ian Gary, this is the reason why Ian Gary got kicked out of the Renegade Gym with Leon Edwards, because Leon Edwards just felt like he was going in there becoming more of a social media star rather than a fighter. It was a strange cultural clashing with Ian Gary as this young fighter that comes up in the social media interaction world. And then here comes Leon Edwards, who is not really old school, but more of an introvert of some sort, very similar to what you see with a lot of kids from the hood, right? You know, they don't really want all that attention or that interaction or this and that. Nate Diaz is sort of in that same light until he became a little bit more famous and got big with the Conor McGregor fight. Now you sort of see a different personality come out of him as a result of that. But yeah, Leon Edwards is just not really into any of those things. So lo and behold, this is what he does. He kicks him out of the gym, and it's just a matter of cultures and whatnot. So I just thought it was interesting to bring that up. Obviously, our main focus is more of the heavyweight division. And by the way, speaking of stirring things up, how about this guy right here, Jarrell Miller, right? What a great segue into that. The guy was literally talking trash the entire time when it was just, let's say, a conventional boxing type of press conference, right? There wasn't really much going on. Obviously, it's the beginning of a boxing press conference. They're like, yeah, we'd like to thank such and such. Yeah, His Excellency. We'd like to thank the British Boxing Board of Commissions. We'd like to thank the Saudis. We'd like to thank the venues. We'd like to thank the janitors that are working in this entire event. Of course, they would never do that. It would be nice if they did, but that's neither here or there. So that's the kind of press conference you get out of a boxing presser. Whereas now with Jarrell Miller, as soon as he gets in there, he's trash talking everybody, giving everybody the finger, letting everybody know about his past beef with Anthony Joshua. And then Anthony Joshua gets in there and literally tells him to F off. And, well, let's see here.
On December 23rd, how's that sound?
Excited for it, you know, this is it. Big time boxing, baby. I want to chop that tree down, and that's...
So he's fighting Daniel Dubois. How about that, right? It's great that he's fighting Daniel Dubois.
What do you think of Daniel Dubois?
If shit had a twin, it'd be his face. It's plain and simple. I mean, listen, bro. Like I said before, we could talk the talk and walk the walk. I talk and I back it up. Like I said, I think the new trainer put the battery in his back, try to motivate him to get in there with the likes of me. You know what I mean? He was scared to fight Joseph Parker. I heard Joseph Parker moved too much for him, so he don't want to chase him around. So he thought because I'm inactive, he going to fight a big guy like me. But I come forward, and I'm just mean, hungry. And like I said before, there's nothing he's going to do to me that's going to bother me. I'm going to hit him with everything in the kitchen sink. And I'm going to send him back to his trainer, and I'm going to tell him, I told you so. So listen, plain and simple, come December 21st, I'm going to kick your stutter your ass. Watch.
Daniel, any response to that? That's
Bring it on. Bring it on.
Bring it on. Bring it on. Bring it on. That's his response, is bring it on. I mean, look, obviously you're not going to beat Jarrell Miller, who comes from New York. By the way, the land of battle rap, the land of trash talking, the land of some of the most rudest human beings on the planet Earth, right? You're not going to beat a guy like that in a trash talking contest. And lo and behold, you know what? Sometimes you need guys like that in the world of combat sports. Obviously, we said it tirelessly over and over again. Conor McGregor is the quintessential aspect of that, right? The symbol of that, and everything that is symbolized as what? Everything that is wrong with the mixed martial arts community or boxing or combat sports in general, right? But in reality, what you don't understand is that it brings a certain level of audience, good or bad, in the world of professional fighting. Now, why do I say good or bad? I'm going to tell you this, okay? It is good because, yes, it brings numbers and eyes into the sport. By the way, the fighters get paid more. And when they get paid more, then everybody gets paid more. The trainers, the managers, the cutmen, sorry, even the staff that works and sells the popcorn in the arenas. And that also includes media people, content creators, media content creators, everybody that is involved or wants to be involved with mixed martial arts, right? It is great for everybody. And then on top of that, it makes the fights even bigger. It gets attention. You have a Super Bowl and WrestleMania feel to it. So everybody is happy in that. Okay, the problem is, if you're a pugilist, you're a purist, you're a real martial artist, okay, and whatever that means to whoever's varying opinions, you're not going to like any of this, right? Because now you're going to bring in a culture of people in the combat sports realm that entirely fall against the ethos of what it means to be a martial artist: humble, respectful, understanding the discipline that it takes to do this sport. The problem is, these guys that you're attracting to come into the world of mixed martial arts and boxing, they're not interested in any of that. They are interested in drama. They are interested in what gets their dopamine high in their brain because there's controversy and there's conflict going on. This is what draws a lot of humans, right? There's very few people that are going to have an intellectual discourse when it comes to the world of combat sports. And that's completely okay. The bottom line is, you just have to understand the good and the bad that comes with it. Now, the good that comes with all this, right? Obviously, the heavyweight division in MMA is stacked. Now, the heavyweight division in boxing is stacked, which is the main thesis of this whole entire video essay, right? So, how is this possible? For one, the Saudis are now putting up all the money to make this super card. You look at this card. You have Philip Hergovich in this card. You got Jarrell Miller. You got Bivol taking on Lyndon Arthur. And then you have Deontay Wilder taking on Joseph Parker. What a name. Then you have Anthony Joshua taking on Otto Wallin. Now, I know the complaints that a lot of people are having. They're saying that they would rather see Anthony Joshua fight Deontay Wilder. Now, let's get to that. The reason why this is not happening right away is because they want to build it up. Guess what? The Saudis also understand boxing in a traditional sense of the way that, let's say, the likes of Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren have built fights over the years. This is just what they do. They give them somewhat of a big name, an okay name, a B-side name, only to build it up so that the two A-side names can clash later down the road, which what? In turn really just creates more revenue, notoriety, and more reputation for this particular fighting promotion that the Saudis are setting up. So the other thing about this is the underrated aspect of Otto Wallin. A lot of people forget that he battered Tyson Fury in the same similar fashion that Francis Ngannou battered him. And some can argue that he was close to losing that fight only because of a deep cut that the referee decided not to stop. On any given UFC event or any given night of a boxing event, that fight would have been stopped by a cut and would have awarded Otto Wallin the winner. But that's neither here or there. Otto Wallin is highly rated. You can't deny him of that. Joseph Parker, you heard it from Jarrell Miller. He literally said that he didn't want to fight Joseph Parker because he moves around too much for him, and he thinks that he's just going to go in there and outbox Jarrell Miller, and he very well could. It could be a possibility that he outpoints Miller. And then you have, yeah, Joseph Parker and Wilder. That's a great fight in and of itself, a great stylistic matchup. Obviously, Wilder still has that one-shot knockout power, but how will that deal with the prowess and the technical and experience of Joseph Parker, being a former world champion himself? So that's a great matchup. And then Anthony Joshua, there remains to be a whole shroud of mystery because now he's changing trainers. You don't know what kind of Anthony Joshua is going to come out for this fight. This could be disastrous for him because obviously it's a bad matchup with the likes of Otto Wallin, right? And obviously his performance that he did against, against Tyson Fury. And not only that, he's coming off of a win against Gassiev. So a highly touted cruiserweight. So Otto Wallin is nothing to play with, and he is going to be a serious problem for Anthony Joshua in this fight. So it's a great 50-50 fight. And then here you have Jai taken on. Who is Jai taken on here? Let's take a look at the rest of this entire card to sort of cap off this this episode right here. So let's take a look at the entire card here. Because right now, that Jai dude is probably the best Day of Reckoning. He is probably the best cruiserweight at this current moment of time right now. Full card. Day of Reckoning. Okay, let's just look at the image for this one. So, Arthur versus Bivol, yeah, Joshua Wallin, Hergovich versus Demori, a guy that's not really well known. How about this? Makhmudov taking on Kabiel, right? Okay, so Jai is taking on somebody that's not really that known, Zorio. Okay, so not anyone really well known. And then Sanchez taking on Fa. Okay, so that's what we have going on for that particular card, right? Nonetheless, it's a great card. And by the way, big ups to the Saudis for being able to put up a card like that, because once again, in any other circumstances, I don't think you would have gotten a card like this, right? The reason why they were able to put this card together is because, let's face it, one of the biggest problems with boxing is the money, right? Well, now they said, all right, let's just cut to the chase. What is the check? What is your price? What do you want to pay? What do you want us to pay for this? And we'll negotiate it and see if it's a fair price for you. Everybody's getting paid now. The excuse is gone, right? So now they're able to make these types of matchups. With the UFC, they've always been able to make matchups like this based on their architecture and, let's say, their structure of the company. There's no way around it. You're always going to fight the best fighting the best because they got you in a contract. But what the Saudis have is more of, let's say, a voluntary interest that is good to the boxers and the promoters themselves, that they literally give you an offer that is hard for you to refuse. So that is the reason why we have some of the best fights moving forward from now until the years to come, both in MMA and boxing. So what a great time and what an awesome time to be a fight fan in this particular era and in this particular time frame. By the way, thank you for watching the entirety of this video. And if you're just watching from this point on, please watch the entire video and don't forget to like and subscribe, share my content, so that we can make this channel as big as it can be, so that we can give you some objective views on combat sports, minus the biasness, and with full details of every spectrum from psychology, sociology, the technical breakdowns, the geopolitics, and everything in between, the drama and the storylines. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Inshallah.